Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing? I have a very special guest that's joining us today. He's a great friend of mine, a friend of the channel. Um, John is a retired detective with LAPD. He spent 33 years with the division with LAPD, but also when he was a detective for gangs, homicide, narcotics. I have to write all this down because literally his CV is so long. Anytime I have a question about procedure, I go to him and ask him. And he worked with the FBI as in the Violent Crime Task Force, with the Fugitive Task Force, and the last 19 years with Major Crimes Division with the LAPD. And also he worked the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So let me bring him up, my good friend, John. Hi, John.
Hi, how you doing, Shab?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good
Um,
today.
so when this case broke, and I always call you with these cases and ask you because you have such vast knowledge of procedure and how protocol procedure of how things are done. And we'll give a disclaimer here, which is John has not worked the Nancy Guthrie case. Um, so everything that we're going to be talking about is based on things he knows about procedure, but not about this case because he has not looked at the documents that have anything to do with this case. He's not in on the know with this case. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay. And so when this case broke, and I called you and I was like, okay, so there's apparently this ransom letter. At that time, it was one that was sent. First, it was sent to KOLD, which is a local Tucson area news agency, and it was sent to them. And then I guess they didn't do anything about it the first day. And so then it was sent to TMZ. And of course, TMZ decides they're going to go live with it and talk about it. And then I think contact the police, the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And I asked you, I said, what do you make of this? Because have you worked ransoms before, kidnappings?
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about that? Like the ones that you have worked?
Well, most of the ones that I work were more related to organized crime, were the suspects, and sometimes the victims were in organized crime. Working major crimes division, part of our case load that we work involved major organized crime, and so most of the kidnappings and those type of investigations I was working was related more to organized crime. But I have worked them.
And being kind of like Los Angeles is very similar, wouldn't you say, to kind of Arizona, where can we call Los Angeles a border town? We can't. We can't. Oh my God. Okay. John makes me be on my P's and Q's all the time. Okay, it's not a border town.
Well, it's got a large immigrant population, but it's not. I wouldn't call it a border town. But
Okay. Okay, that's a stretch. Okay.
yeah.
So, but when you've dealt with ransom kidnappings, it's mostly, well, I guess, is it going to be mostly things that happen in Los Angeles, or is it like over the border in Mexico?
Uh, I've worked cases involving both that
Okay.
were in, neighboring counties or cities to LA and over the border.
And what did you tell me? So, what do you think about this as far as does this have the hallmarks of a typical kidnapping for ransom?
No, in my opinion, just again, I don't have any access to all the investigation. I know what you guys know from social media and the news and things like that, but it's very uncharacteristic of a normal kidnapping. Just the victim doesn't match the normal victimology, and the way they're going about the call for a ransom and stuff like that is very untypical of a traditional kidnapping for ransom.
And why do you say that?
Well, you look at the victim, she's a 84-year-old woman who's obviously going to have some health and medical issues, which is very difficult to deal with holding a hostage. She's not very mobile. According to news reports, she can only walk like 30 yards or something like that, or 30 feet without resting and stuff. And making your ransom demands in the media is very uncharacteristic. The goal of a true kidnapper is to be more low profile, because their ultimate aim is to get paid and get away. And so the more that attention you draw to it, more difficult that's going to be. Why would you send the ransom letters or demands to a news outlet? From what I understand, the first ransom made a demand and gave a deadline in the very first one. But, like TMZ, they get thousands of communications a day. And I'm sure that there's a lot of weird ones involved in that, in their normal daily traffic of messaging. And so who's viewing all those incoming messages are probably interns and stuff like that. And they may or may not put credibility into this. So you may or may not get the results that you want. You know, if it was more traditional kidnapping, they would more typically reach out to the family themselves.
Because that's what it always comes down to, doesn't it? It's like, what is the goal here? So with a ransom like this, and they haven't released the entire ransom note, there's been enough that they've put out on media that we can kind of piece it together, right? So the first one, the deadline was 5 p.m. on Friday. And
So
today,
sending to a media outlet, you have no idea how long it's going to take for that message or demand to even be reviewed, and then whether it's going to be taken serious or not, and how long is that going to take to go through the process or the chain at that news organization. How long does it take for TMZ's message to come in, get reviewed, get pushed up, the chain of command, and then to make a decision whether they're going to call local law enforcement or not. In traditional kidnappings, the kidnappers are going to reach out to family members and hopes that they don't reach out. They just pay the demand and get their loved one back, and their hope is that they won't reach out to law enforcement, and they're usually warned not to reach out to law enforcement.
you're right. That is usually the demand, isn't it? If you
Yeah.
contact law enforcement, XYZ will happen. There's a
Right.
warning in there. Yeah.
In this particular case, they're making it, a social media, or a very public event, and bring a lot of media attention, a lot of attention onto the case from the very get-go, which is typically not traditional, because it's going to affect your goal of getting your money and getting away.
Yeah. So then what is your goal then? What can we surmise is the goal of these? And we don't know, right? If the ransom people who are writing the ransom are the people that brought harm, because obviously there's blood on the porch. So it's not a far-fetched thing to say that Nancy is harmed. That brought harm to Nancy. Is it? But I mean,
Right.
but John, like, it seems kind of weird to not blame, like, to not think that they're the same people, right? I
Well,
mean,
no, to me, I told you from the very beginning that the people putting out the ransom demands in the media, in my opinion, they probably weren't the real people involved, or the real kidnappers. You've already had one guy prosecuted trying to, you know, gain from the tragic event. And in big cases like this, especially the more the media attention, all kinds of crazies are going to come out and, attempt to get attention, or attempt to, benefit from, the Guthrie family mishap.
but would they have known about it so early on? So,
Well, it was in the media.
well, KOLD supposedly got it Monday. So you think, I mean, because I guess I don't know what was going on in Pima County, in Arizona. Maybe it was a local thing and they did glom onto it pretty quickly. But those people are, whether they're involved in actually harming Nancy or they're just doing like a ruse, like you called it a red herring, correct? In the
Yeah.
beginning when we spoke about it, whether they're doing that or not, they're still going, if and when they find these people, they are going to be held to, they're going to be found guilty and breaking laws. Isn't that
Right.
true?
Yes.
Yeah. And so um, now with the second ransom demand that has come out. So today at 5 o'clock Arizona time, which is in a few hours here, they're getting close. Well, actually, yeah, it's in a few hours. I think that this is, we don't know yet because we can't confirm it, but there's been leaks by the people who received the second note. They kind of leaked it, they put it out, and then they pulled it. That now the first offer was they wanted $4 million in Bitcoin. And if it wasn't paid by Friday at 5 p.m., that by today it's going up to 6 million. And then if it isn't met at 5 p.m., the deadline today, that she will no longer be with us.
Right.
And it looks like it looks like the sheriffs and the FBI are kind of doing an investigation as if like they're still looking for her. So I think I asked you about this because there was a local guy that Brian Etten had spoken to, and he said, we had Borstar out here. We had Borstar and their canines out here, and they're the best in the country. And if they, did a tracking and they looked for, potentially where she could have gone, if they didn't find anything, there's nothing out here to find. And I'd asked you about that, and I said, is he correct? Is Borstar the best in our country? And you said,
Yeah, I think they are. They got besides well trained canines and handlers, they have a lot of electronic equipment for searching and stuff like that. So, but my experience with dogs, no matter how good they are, dogs are not infallible. If the dog gets the scent, they'll alert. But if something prevents them from getting the scent, they won't alert. And so they're not infallible. But the dogs, the border dogs, and they're some of the best we have, and some of the best trained we have. So yeah, they are good, but if a dog's not going to alert if they don't get sent, and there's a lot of reasons why they don't, wind patterns and stuff like that, it's just one, but other scents concealing it and stuff like that. Traditionally, like in narcotics trafficking, when people are mailing or moving narcotics in large quantities, they'll wrap it in cellophane, hundreds of times, and they'll put like coffee grounds or other scents,
to distract the dogs.
to distract the dog or to throw off the scent of the dog. So there's a lot of factors that determine whether the dog is going to alert or not, and it's just whether they get the scent. And there's a lot of natural factors that affect that too.
So even though the Borstar was out there and they had the canines out there, it still wouldn't stop, the sheriff's department or the FBI from continuing to do a search. Like,
Well,
yesterday
yeah.
they went out to what we think are septic tanks in the area. It's been debated whether they're like
Well,
water tanks or septic tanks. So that's a normal thing to do then.
oh yeah,
Even
you
though,
always double up on the dog because there's a chance that the dog is going to miss the scent. So you search everything else by hand in addition to it. But the Border Star, they also have a lot of you know electronic equipment. I don't want to get too much into it, but they have also electronic equipment to search large areas looking for things. Um, there's a lot we don't know, and a couple things in that area, you know, if she is not in that area, she's not in that area, there's nothing to find. You know, it looks to me like, based on the blood trail and stuff like that, she was removed from the home, removed from the scene, and whether she was taken or moved to somewhere close to the home, it appears not if they're not finding anything in those searches. But then again, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if they are finding things in those searches and not talking about them.
yeah, and you're one that always reminds me that about press conferences, and you say that, don't always believe what press conferences, what people say in
I'm
press
saying,
conferences,
yeah,
right? Why is that?
because the people giving the press conferences are not the investigators that have all the exacting firsthand knowledge, and the press conferences have uh, different purposes than the investigation. Purpose of a press conference is to appease the community and the media, and sometimes incorrect information is put out on press conferences unintentionally, and sometimes false information is put out in press conferences intentionally. If putting out information is gonna affect the case, um, then you're not gonna put it out in a press conference.
So sometimes press conferences are done for PR purposes.
That's
Sometimes
that's all a press conference is a PR maneuver.
extravaganza. Um,
And nothing they say in a press conference is legally binding or going to affect the case.
so they can basically say whatever.
Yeah, I've had cases that I've been involved in where we intentionally put out false information in press conferences. Um, you know, like in a homicide, if we had a witness, we would intentionally put out in the press conference that there were no witnesses, or nobody else was at the home when the crime occurred.
And
I
why
have
would you do that?
so that I had one. It was a organized crime hit or assassination at a home, and the victim's girlfriend was in the home and saw the suspect but hid. And so the suspects didn't know that the girlfriend was in the house. So in the press conference, we intentionally put out that there were no witnesses, nobody else was at the house, in order to protect her and keep her safe until trial. But
So you did all this.
that's just one example of where we would um, you put out false information. There's a lot of different reasons why, but a press conference is just a PR maneuver to appease the community, calm the community, and ensure the community that law enforcement's working the case to the best of their abilities and things like that. And it's usually, you see it's always command staff. And they may bring in an investigator to give some details that they want to put out, but usually it's a command staff person that's got totally different goals and motivations, and his job is different than the investigators.
Yeah, sometimes you as a lead detective on a case don't want certain things out, but big
Uh,
brass is going to win, right? And they're going to put
yeah,
out what they
they
want.
sometimes we get overruled and they put out what they want, but
Sometimes, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, so at this point, um, we're about 8 days in. We're about 8 days from when she was reported to be missing.
Hmm.
What do you think? And again, this is speculating because John has not worked this case, and we need to be really clear with that. So, what would you expect to be happening in these hours leading up to the second and supposed to be the final deadline? What can we expect is happening right now?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any, just because the deadline's there, there's not going to be a big change in the investigation. Also, the pressure is going to be mounting, but the investigation is going to be continuing as it normally would. You're going to be following up all your leads, and interviewing all your witnesses and potential suspects or potential people involved. You're going to be doing all your electronics forensics. So you can meet all your the rather forensic with the fingerprints and tracing of vehicles and searching out for more camera views and things like that. There's 1,000 things going on in the investigation that's been going on since the very beginning. And I want to go back make one quick statement. When I was talking about the red herring, you got to keep in mind that this could be a completely unrelated crime to a kidnapping.
Yeah,
And the kidnapping that came out in the media is either people trying to take advantage of the situation of a missing elderly lady with a wealthy family and trying to get money, or it could be a suspect involved in another crime trying to throw the police off the 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 true investigation and get them, distracted. So I wanted to mention that earlier and I didn't get it in, but so when I say a red herring, again, not knowing what's going on in the investigation and what they're seeing, it can be completely different.
Yeah, good
Uh,
point.
and the family and law enforcement, the the request for a ransom in the media could be unrelated, but the law enforcement and the family is through other means dealing with the actual kidnappers and negotiating with them.
We
You
don't
know,
know, right? We
we
don't
don't
know if
know.
that's
Yeah.
happening, right? And we were talking about this before. So protocol for the FBI when it comes to ransoms, and is this like true also for FBI and law enforcement when it comes to ransoms? What is protocol for proof of life? Do we negotiate, and how does that work?
Well, in law enforcement in general, FBI and local law enforcement as well, our ultimate policy is we don't want to ever pay ransom, and we're definitely not going to agree to pay ransom without a proof of life. Because once a payment is made, it changes the investigation from an active criminal suspect involved in a crime to now a suspect who's got additional financial resources and is fleeing. And so that changed our perspective and the work that we're going to be doing. But
So yeah,
go ahead.
you just basically handed them $6 million
Right.
resource. Yeah,
Yep.
but go ahead. Sorry.
And the ultimate to pay the ransom is the family, but the FBI is going to be there in the local law enforcement will be there as an advisory role saying we don't do that. We shouldn't do that. You're going to make it worse. And there are circumstances that might change that here and there. Every case is a little bit different, and there might be, if they truly believe that she is no longer with us and they're out of leads, then they may, agree to a payment so that they can attempt to trace it and things like that. But that would
Mm.
be a very extreme case. But the general policy is we don't play kidnappers because it encourages more kidnapping, and that you definitely aren't going to even agree to make a payment without a proof of life.
What does it change? I mean, is it often that it changes from now proof of life to now you didn't meet the deadline and now we are going for a body. Now we want the body. And um, now I want like $7 million to return the body. And that just, does that happen often in ransom kidnappings?
Yeah, not very often. Usually what you'll see with a true kidnapper, again, their ultimate goal is to get paid. They've
With a
gone through,
true, that's right,
yeah,
with a
with
true
a true
kidnapping.
kidnapper who's kidnapping for ransom, their goal is to get paid. So what we see in a lot of these, like where executives are kidnapped in Mexico or other foreign countries and stuff like that, is they'll set their deadlines and they'll play hardball. But when in negotiations and deadlines pass, they'll decrease the amount that they're asking for just to get something rather than the company or the family saying, hey, we cannot come up with $6 million. It's impossible. I don't have access to that. And so your deadline's going to come, but I cannot come up with that much money. Then they might say, oh, okay, well, make it 4 million. And how much can you come up with? And so they'll renegotiate a lower price because they went through all the effort. They want to get something rather than nothing, rather
Right.
than killing the victim and walking away with nothing. Now they've committed a lot of crimes that they're potentially looking to get charged with, but they got nothing to show for it, you know?
Yeah, so typically it will go down because the ultimate goal is that they want money. But in this case, reaching out to the media instead of the family, involving police, knowing the police are involved, knowing that the media, especially TMZ, is going to broadcast this and it's going to go into the hands of law enforcement really fast. It's not going to be quiet. It's not going to be discreet. It just doesn't. meet the criteria of what a normal kidnapping for ransom is, right?
And again, there's so many variables here. It could be a psychotic person that thinks they're doing a good job and that's how it should be done, and they just don't realize that they're not doing it correctly, or not doing it in a way that would benefit the most. They're just not thinking clearly. So a lot of variables, but from the very beginning, this case just didn't sound right to me, and it definitely does not meet the patterns of a normal kidnapping.
Yeah. And John has been saying that from the gate to me. And I brought this up, and I think like it's a good thing to share. I mean, you kind of set me straight. I said, well, what if, okay, so if the goal isn't to get money, what if the goal is it's someone who's really obsessed with Savannah Guthrie and wants to get her attention? And this is how, like, let's go get her mom. And then you said to me,
Well, especially being in LA and working around a lot of Hollywood celebrities with stalkers and stuff like that. If that were the case, again, not all cases follow traditional,
right,
lines, but traditionally in cases like that, if their goal is to get the celebrity's attention or make an effort to communicate with a celebrity. So I would think that any outreach would be in an effort to communicate one-on-one with a celebrity, or somehow, you know, make contact. But those could be satisfied in the demands that she's putting out these press conferences and things, because now they see her on TV directly responding to them.
to
Um,
them.
yeah.
To them. And I think that some of the stuff that she's been saying, this is all conjecture. And I know you don't like, I have to always preface that. But it seems like, I'm just guessing, that some of the stuff that she's saying is in response to what is written in these letters and the way she's responding, in my opinion, because she's a very accomplished news person. Like, I don't even want to call her a news anchor. She's a media personality who knows how to read teleprompters, knows how to memorize scripts. And on both of these occasions, she is reading from a script. And I think she could have even memorized it, but I think there's a reason
Well,
she wants to get it exact. Is that
they're, the FBI response team is going to be right there in the background, and they're giving her, um, telling her what is the safest things or the best things for her to say, and the last one where they're talking about paying, a lot of the things I'm hearing that are typical psychology stuff,
language?
trying to humanize the victim, and
Yeah.
reminding the person, mind the suspect, that hey, this is a person, that's a loved one. It is not just an item or an object. They're trying to humanize the victim.
Yeah. Mommy,
Yeah,
mama. Yeah. Like Nancy saying her name. And
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So again, in a case like this, the FBI has a complete response team that's going to respond to this, and there's
yes.
going to be people from the behavioral science division there, and
My
helping her,
favorite.
yeah, helping her to craft what to say and what words to use, what words not to use, and
Yeah.
things like that. And again, um, we don't know, because the communications that we know about may not be the ones that she's responding to. Again, if her and the FBI or her and law enforcement are responding, or the family and law enforcement have other communication methods with the actual kidnappers, they may be responding to, messages that we don't know about,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
they're saying specific things to make it clear that, hey, we're acknowledging you,
Right.
based on this message.
I kind of see, and I'm guessing, don't know any insight to this, but I kind of see that. And I'm sure part of the people in the behavioral science unit that are there are also very good at like profiling from written work as well. And not saying that the written letters are from the same person again, but they probably know how to profile personalities from
Right.
writing. So I'd asked you about the Bitcoin and the address because when it first came out, when I first talked to you about this, the second ransom note wasn't out yet. And what they were saying was TMZ had reported that they were coming out with the IP address, was a masked IP address. And it was an interview. Well, it wasn't. So Harvey Levin and what's his name? Garagos, the lawyer, have a podcast they do, and they're kind of going back and forth. And Garagos is like, no, I know it's not true. Like, I know that the FBI, from my documents that I've read, I know that they have a way to trace Bitcoin addresses. And I asked you about that. And what do you think about that?
Well, especially nowadays, and with the resources and technology of the FBI when they're involved, yeah, the bitcoins can be traced. The IP addresses can be traced. The wallets that you know when Bitcoin first came out, it was kind of like the wild wild west,
Okay.
and just like any change of technology, law enforcement is usually a year or 2 years behind it. You know, with our with the laws that regulate new technology, it takes a while for law enforcement to say, "Hey, wait a minute, the laws that apply to cell phone messages don't apply to the direct connect stuff that Nextel used to use." So we had to change. It took a process till hey, wait a minute, you can't wiretap direct connect because it's a different technology and the laws don't cover that specifically. So then the laws have to be changed. There's a process. Same thing with Bitcoin. When Bitcoin first came out, again, it was like the Wild Wild West and was used widely by criminal organizations to move funds. Now there's a lot of new regulations, and the wallets can even be publicly viewed by anybody.
Huh.
You can't see who owns the wallet or who's behind it, but you can see into parts of the wallet whether money's transferred in there or not. Same thing.
Yeah.
Once the money goes into that wallet,
Okay.
you have to transfer it to either a different wallet or a bank and things like that, and that's all stuff that can be subpoenaed or warrants drawn up for.
Even if it's a bank that's like a Swedish bank or like in the Caymans, like we can still somehow get access to it.
Yes, and there are a lot of ins and outs. The more sophisticated the person moving the money is,
Yeah.
the more difficult it is, but and more time consuming it is, but ultimately it's doable, especially for not as much for local law enforcement agencies, but for the FBI and other government agencies, it can be
Yeah.
done.
They have the resources, and one thing I want you guys to get from this video and having John here is John is really adept, or was when he was working, at writing warrants. He knows how to write warrants. He knows how to write federal warrants, and he knows how to write state run warrants. And so some of the stuff I was asking John about, that I want everybody to get the knowledge that I have from speaking with John, is, so I talked to you about, hey, look, this is the third time at that point. This is the third, I think it's more now, the third time that they're searching this house. Why did the Pima County Sheriff release the scene? And then now they're back and they've secured the scene and they're searching it again. And you said some very logical things to me about how the process works when you have to get a search warrant. Like, so the first time that they show up, they might not know, for instance, go ahead and explain. You're better at it than I am.
Well, when you initially get to a crime scene, you have to obtain a search warrant to be able to search it, and the things that you find in it can be legally seized or reviewed and or seized. And when you exhaust everything that you're looking for, legally, you can't hold a crime scene indefinitely. You can't hold a crime scene if it holds no evidentiary value. And again, I don't know what's happening in this investigation,
Right.
but I'm just talking about you know
General.
typical in general scenarios. So if I've had it many times where I've searched a home, and now I've done all my forensic stuff. I've searched everything that I think is needs to be searched. I've seized all the things. When you write law enforcement writes a search warrant, you can't just go into it gives you the right to go into a house and search and seize certain things, but I can't just take anything. I have to ahead of time put in my warrant what I'm looking for and what I expect to find, and request the judge to allow me to seize it. So I have to put in there, hey, I'm looking for financial records. I'm looking for forensic evidence of a crime or homicide. I have to be very specific at what I'm asking for to search, why I'm going there, and what I'm looking for. And I only know what I know at the time that I wrote the warrant. So if we get the warrant signed, we make entry, and now I see something in there that, oh, that probably has evidentiary value, but it's outside the scope of my warrant. I didn't ask to seize it, so I have to go back and amend my warrant, or I have to write a new search warrant. Now, if I'm in this house and I've searched everything that I've said that I want to search, and I've looked for everything that I said I was, trying to find, and I've seized everything that I could, and I've done all my forensic stuff. At some point, to my knowledge, that house or that location or vehicle no longer holds any evidentiary value. Uh, Legally, I can't keep it closed as a crime scene. At some point, I have to release it legally. And now I go and interview a witness, and they give me a piece of information. Hey, this book somehow is involved in my case, and I remember, hey, I saw that book in the house. Now I have to write another search warrant to go back into the house, secure the location, and seize the new item that I just learned about. You know, and that could have been why they're going back. They've obtained additional information, and now they're going back to see something that they didn't originally were not originally aware was involved in the crime. Um,
Can we talk about it in terms of the cameras? So if you write a search warrant before getting on the property and you know from looking at the outside of the house, let's say they have a ring or nest system, and you in your search warrant write for the physical ring or nest. We're just
right.
using this as an example. And then you get there and you realize that there is now a hard drive that you didn't ask for in your search warrant. So now you go back and you explain that and you'd amend it to now include.
Yeah. If I've already left, I would have to write a new search warrant. If I'm there, I can go to the judge and try and amend the warrant, and then go ahead and seize it. Um, but again, there's a lot of logical reasons why I would leave a crime scene and then need to go back, and that's happened to me many times throughout my career.
And we talked about this, and I think this is very valuable for everyone else to understand this as well. In this case with the Guthrie family, they've been very cooperative, or so it seems to everyone, with law enforcement. They've allowed them to search. I'm sure if they're like, can we seize your vehicle and go through it? Because it was the last car that Nancy was seen in or was in. They're probably like, okay. And I talked to you about this and you were like, I would still get a warrant. And why is
Well,
that?
well, there's a thing that we can do to the family. So the sister's car, I can ask the sister, hey, can we take your car to the crime lab and search it? And she says, yeah, I don't have a problem with it. Take it. I would have her sign a form. It's a consent to search form, right? But in a lot of cases, that is not as strongly legally binding, and she can revoke it at any time.
Mm,
So if I truly believe a person is a suspect, I'm, I'm just thinking as me as a detective and working case that I've worked before.
yeah.
If in my mind there's going to be something of true evidentiary value there, or um, there's possibility that this family member may become a suspect, I'm not going to want to have obtained that information based on a consent to search, because they have a lot of defense maneuvers to try and throw that evidence out. And they say, well, the police were, there were five guys there in uniform wearing guns and sticks and stuff like that. And then I was intimidated and they kind of pressured me to sign it. Then everything that I got as evidence based on that consent to search goes out the window.
Can't,
Or
yeah.
if somebody gives me consent to search a house and we're about halfway through the search and we're getting ready to go into a closet, the person say, wait a minute, I don't want you to go to my closet. Well, you gave me the consent to search. Well, I don't want you to go in that closet. I'm taking it back. Now get out of my house.
Mm,
Then we have no legal recourse to stay there. We have to leave because we're there on consent. Versus if I have a search warrant, they say don't search that closet. Say, tough. I'm searching anyways. I have a search warrant.
yeah.
So, but in a case like this with the Guthrie family, I'm sure they're using a lot of consent search to, like, maybe search their phone records or social medias and stuff like that, that just make it easier to access, because they're just trying to obtain information, um, and they're not truly suspects, or there's very low likelihood that they're going to be suspects. That's when you would use a consent to search. Like in homicides, I've, especially with minors and stuff, you get consent search phone records from their adult guardians, you know, because it's faster, easier, and we can immediately start searching their phones or social media, stuff like that.
Right.
Uh, and would that be a case where you truly do not have any information or believe that the parents may be involved, and you're just trying to expedite the investigation?
Like get passwords and everything too, right?
Yes.
And then, so one of the things that we discussed with this is, and I think that everyone here kind of understands that, but it's really good to reiterate this. So when there's any crime, the typical protocol, how detectives, how law enforcement goes about it is you start in the inner circle first and then you work your way out, right? So you start with like the people who saw them last, the closest family members, and you work your way out. And sometimes, or a lot of the time, you're not just trying to prove who did it, but you're also trying to eliminate people as suspects. Is that true?
Correct. So you're eliminating potential suspects all the time. That's just as important as identifying a suspect, is eliminating. You have 10 people in the family and you eliminate 9 of them immediately as being suspects. Now you can focus on the one person, or you could if you eliminate all 10, then you can start focusing outside that circle. You just kind of, work in, you know behind the scenes on this investigation. There are thousands of things going on that the, you know normal layman doesn't understand. How many interviews and how many, we call knock and talks, or door knocks, looking for cameras and things like that. You think about uh, the Guthrie home. She's an 84-year-old woman. She probably does have some wealth. How many people come in and out of the house? I'm sure she doesn't clean her own house.
Right.
I'm sure she doesn't, mow her own lawns. I'm sure she doesn't, she may, but she probably doesn't clean her own pools. She probably doesn't, she probably has somebody coming in there, like a nurse, that helps her with her medication or things like that, or, physical therapy. So there's all those people in either, past people who have, was her pool cleaner 2 years ago, but no longer is her pool cleaner. All those people have to be tracked down, interviewed,
Interviewed.
questioned. Yeah, because you don't know who has inside knowledge of where the cameras are, what her pattern of life is, and how often her relatives visit, when she's alone, when she's not alone. So those are things that would be very helpful to a kidnapper. So you have to follow all those leads, and they're that could be 20, 30 people who have come and gone from her house that all have to be interviewed, all have to be eliminated as potentially involved. And there's and that's just the people at her house, let alone that have contact with her in regular daily life and that kind of things.
Right, right. And um if she was younger, it'd be like boyfriends, and it's not just family members. It goes out to like significant others, and like, people that you might not even have like as,
Yeah.
best friends or whatever. Yeah.
And now today, in today's day and age, you think about how many pieces of electronics the average person has in their home now. Phones, iPads, laptops,
Smart homes.
smart homes, standalone computers, and even
Yeah.
in the phone, how many different apps can be tracked and things. There's a lot of technology in the homes today that all needs to be searched and reviewed and all that kind of stuff.
Do you need a
And
search warrant for all those? Separate search warrant for all those devices?
yes,
Yeah.
well, you can incorporate multiple things into one search warrant. So I can write one search warrant for all her electronics devices.
Okay, so if you have a Nest Cam and
Hmm.
then you have like a smartphone, a smart home that utilizes some other technology besides Nest, would that be like, let's say there's three different
Yeah,
companies that you use?
when you write a search warrant, you can ask for multiple things in a search warrant. And think about it, like if I'm gonna search a house, I have to ask in the warrant, hey, I want to search the house. I want to search the detached or attached garage. I want to search the shed in the backyard. I want to search the cars that are on the property. You have to ask for all those things separately, because if you write a search warrant to the house and then you find something in the shed, they're going to say, well, you didn't have, what were you doing in the shed? The search warrant was for the house. So in a search warrant, I can ask, hey, I want to search any camera systems. I want to search her laptop. I want to search. Yeah, you can ask for multiple things in a single search warrant, but you just have to lay them all out specifically. And if it's not laid out specifically, you can't search it. And
And
and like I said, you there's a section in a warrant where you're asking items to be searched, and then there's another section of the warrant that's saying items that I want to seize and take into evidence. So, and you have to be specific on what you're asking for. The only thing that is outside the warrant is something that's illegal on its face. So if I write a warrant to a house to search for, and I'm looking for a gun that was used in a murder. So I write a search warrant to the house and I'm searching, and I ask to search for a firearm and I want to seize it.
okay.
Um, and then I go into the house and now I find a bag of cocaine. That is illegal on its face itself. I can seize that outside the scope of my warrant. But if I go in there and I didn't ask for paper documents, but I go in there and now I find the registration to the gun, or another piece of paperwork that connects the person to the gun, or I see clothing that was used in the homicide or something. If I didn't ask for it in the warrant, I can't seize it because it's not illegal and it's on its face value.
So what if you ask for a Glock 9 millimeter, and you're specific in your warrant, you ask for a specific, like, I want a Glock, like the brand. That's what I want to seize. And then you go in there and you see a CZ 9 millimeter. Can you take that?
No,
So
unless
what do you
the gun
do?
unless the gun is illegal in its face value, and like say the serial numbers on the firearm is obliterated, that's an illegal firearm to possess, period. It's illegal on its face value. But if you own multiple guns and I write the warrant for a specific gun, I can only take that specific gun. I can't take any other guns that you have. Now,
Would you do that? Would you put yourself in a corner that way? Would you ask for a Glock, or would you just say, I'm looking for a 9 millimeter?
I would put, I'm looking for 9 millimeter.
What if you
Or
find five and they're all
I
legal?
well, But if I've asked to seize them, I can seize them
Okay.
because they're covered in my warrant. So there are certain areas that you can be broader on a warrant. I'm looking to seize, you know, all firearms and ammunition and holsters and there's a whole list of things. When I'm looking for a gun, there's a whole list of things I'm asking for.
Okay.
Um, there's a whole item of things that I'm going to be asking to look for and seize.
Yeah, it's like your typical stuff that you usually ask for.
Yeah.
Um, uh, have you ever heard of, and I think Lana wanted to know this, have you ever heard of something called an elimination interview?
Uh,
Is that
yeah, it's more of like a generic term where I'm going to say a family. I've heard the term. It's not one that I would normally use, but it's an interview to get a person's to lock them in on a story, lock them into an alibi, and knowing that they're probably not going to be a suspect. So now I got it recorded that now that I'm trying to eliminate that person. Usually, um, again, that's not a term that in LA that we would use or that we would do, but it's part of the process that we're doing all the time. We're talking to people in that inner circle and trying to eliminate them as potential suspects.
but the term isn't called an elimination interview it's just a typical interview. That's the term.
Yeah, we're just questioning people and investigating our case. Again, every department has their own terminology and things that they use. That's not. I'm familiar with a term. I've heard it before, but that's not one that we use in LA. We're not going to hold something as formal because that makes it sound like the purpose of me going into that interview is intentionally to eliminate them.
Right.
Where I'm just trying to find facts and find the truth, and I go where the evidence takes me.
Right.
No matter where it takes me, and keeping my mind open. That you know, I've
It
been
might
very
not.
surprised. I've been very surprised who the suspects actually were.
Yeah, it might not end up being an elimination, so why cut
Right.
yourself off
Why
in that
why
way?
call it that? Why call it that? Um, you know, you and I have had a lot of conversations about the defense and the tactics and tricks and
Yeah.
so if there's a piece of paper that says that I was conducting an elimination hearing and our interview, and the person made some you know incriminating statements, the defense attorney is going to say, did you Mirandize them?
Right.
Did wasn't it your intention to eliminate them as a suspect? And why is it that you went in the interview not thinking they were a suspect? So a defense attorney is
Right.
going to flip that backwards on you, and that's just a term that we would never use.
Right. That would kind of pigeonhole you. Yeah. Um, and we have to let you go soon because you're so kind. He's kind enough to give me 45 minutes to an hour. We're like 53 minutes. I just wanted to thank you for being here. And I think that we like covered some good ground with this and, the warrants and everything. I know that, let me make sure that, everyone's just loving you being here. Murky
I
says, Christy
I
Nome didn't, yes, go ahead.
I have a little more time, so I can stick around for a while. And I
Okay.
know that you had mentioned ahead of time that you want to talk about the difference between federal and state warrants.
Yes, yes. Okay, yes. Okay, perfect. Let's do that and then we'll close out with that. So Murky says, thank you, Murky says, Christy Nome did an interview. She said she sent DHS out there with their canines to look everywhere. Yeah, what's DHS stand for? Do I know? Am I
Department of
supposed to
Homeland
know?
Security.
Okay, there it is. Yes. Okay. Yes. So
And the
Department of
border,
Homeland Security went out there, huh?
yeah, and the Border Patrol falls under DHS.
Okay. And the feds are Cash Patel is supposed to be there today.
What's
He
that?
Cash
Oh,
Patel.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, he like had like a pre-planned trip, and so I don't know if he's like what he's gonna do when he gets out there, but he supposedly already had a pre-planned trip. But yes, please explain to us, because there are differences between a federal and a state warrant. And so please explain that to us.
Well, um, there's a lot of small nuances between a state and a federal warrant, but again, it depends on the case. Where is there a federal violation? You're going to charge them federally, and or is it going to go in as a state case? And in this type of situation, or every major case like this, there's the back and forth. Like when I was working task forces, we would always debate back and forth whether state or search warrants or federal search warrants.
Right.
State search warrants are a lot faster to obtain. It's a lot faster and easier for me to obtain a state search warrant than it is in the federal system. They have more hoops to go through and things like that. A state search warrant usually can be more broad. Like when we were talking about, I'm looking for a gun used in a homicide. I'm going to ask for, ammunition, holsters, cleaning equipment, anything to show that, because the gun might have been discarded, but usually the remnants of the gun, like the holsters and things like that, may still remain in the house, or
Okay.
ammunition. Where state search warrants are usually easier to obtain and more broad in the scope of the search. Federal search warrants are slower, uh, not harder, but slower to obtain, and are usually even more restrictive of what you can search for and seize. You got to be more specific in the search warrants. So um, if if you write a state search warrant in a case, it may or may not be able to meet the federal standards and be used in a federal case. So that there's always that balance that you have to. There is a process that you can go through to get state search warrants adopted so they can be used in the federal system and stuff like that. But that's the biggest difference, is the scope of the search, the speed of how quickly you can obtain them and things like that.
And you were saying with a state search warrant, like you have a judge, usually law enforcement, the state law enforcement has a judge usually on call to do it at like whatever hours, right? But then like,
Yeah.
can you explain that? And then, but like a federal one, you have to call the prosecutor. So the special
Well,
prosecutor.
yeah. So in the federal system, they they bring prosecutors into their investigations very early on. So the prosecutors are part of the investigation early on. On the state system, for me, if I don't want to, I do not have to involve a prosecutor until I'm ready to file my case. So I can, the same thing with a search warrant. If I write a search warrant, I could take that search warrant directly to a judge and get it signed. In the federal system, when they write a search warrant, it has to go through a prosecutor who reviews the warrant before it goes to a judge. The exception of that is on the state system, if we're going to do something off hours, like where the courts aren't normally open. I have
Like
to go,
weekends.
like weekends are off hours. Like,
Okay.
I'm doing a case, on a murder scene, and I want to do a warrant for this house, and it's midnight. There are no judges at the courthouse working. So, but there is always an on-call judge. So in that situation, we call the district attorney, or the DA's command post, or district attorney's command post, and get them involved to look at my warrant and decide whether it's worthy to wake up a judge or not, that kind of thing. So that's the exception on the off hour, like on the weekends or late at night.
And
But
they've been doing that on this case. They've been going in, but some of it seems like it's kind of consensual searches of the house, of like Annie's house or like Nancy's
you
house
have
late at
you
night.
have I mean, you have no way of knowing that.
Oh, yeah,
We have
true.
we have no way of
You
knowing
have
that.
no
I
way of
mean,
knowing that. Yes.
again, if it's a family member, like it's the sister's house, I could walk up to her house, and I don't have to line up a tactical team and smash in her door, and announce, yeah, a search warrant, open the door. That I don't have to
Right.
do that. I can walk up to her and say, hey, we got a search warrant to look at your laptop. Do you mind if we come in? And you could be more cordial and less tactical about it. So you don't know if that's what's happening, or they're going in there in in the like the law enforcement going back to the house. And I saw on one of the podcasts there was pictures being taken and stuff like that. That doesn't have to be anything nefarious. I mean, it could be they went to the house and they're cooperating and they're saying, yeah, here we have here's these legal documents with the will and her financial records or whatever, and they're photographing them, and that kind of stuff, because they don't want to take important documents, and they don't have a warrant or anything to take them. The family's just cooperating.
It's just typical, like a nothing
Right.
burger. They're just
Yeah.
taking
So,
pictures of nothing. Yeah.
again, this is a conversation that you and I have had many, many times. You know, right now, the people on podcasts and social media, they want to know everything. They want to know what's going on. And in turn, a lot of people are surmising based on what they're seeing is going on, but you have no way of knowing it's accurate. We see a lot of times where, even in this case, something happens, and then an hour later the police go back to the sister's house, or they go and impound the mother's car from the house,
Right.
something. And people say, oh, this happened, then that happened, it's got to be related.
Right.
And it probably wasn't related, but people are surmising things based on what they don't, their misinformation. And
Right.
right now, again, working all these cases, I can tell you that law enforcement is not telling you anything that they don't have to, anything, and they don't have to really tell you anything. So they're not telling you anything that's important to the investigation. So any people, myself, any of these experts getting on all the news channels and stuff, they're guessing, because
Yeah.
they don't have access to what's happening with the interviews, what's happening with the videos that they're finding, what's happening with their forensic evidence and the determinations they're seeing there, what's happening with the blood test results, what's happening, we don't know any of that. So we can't tell you what's really happening, because it would all be a guess.
Well, can I ask you on that note, can I ask you a question? And again, you're going to be guessing, but what do you think about somebody, a very reputable newscaster, podcaster, coming out and saying she has a very reputable source inside the investigation who has never steered her wrong, who this is early on, this is maybe like, it was maybe Wednesday, Thursday of last week, said that this person told them that the brother-in-law is definitively a person of interest. They might have even said suspect. I don't know, but I'll be nice and say person of interest.
Right. So, two things. If anybody in law enforcement who actually has credible information on the investigation is talking to the media, that is totally unethical, and that person should be prosecuted, in my opinion. Well, not in my opinion, the law's opinion. uh, s- Secondly, it's semantics. A person of interest, what does that mean? Anybody who had recent contact with, or the last person dropped her off at the house. Am I interested in that as an investigator? Yeah. So I'm going to talk to them. Does that make him guilty or a suspect versus, hey, you had last contact with her, and now I'm interested in what that contact was all about and what it was result, and are you involved or you aren't involved? But that doesn't mean anything bad. We've seen many of these really high profile cases where the media has tagged somebody as a suspect or a person of interest, and it turns out we're not involved. Like, a missing child case where the parents give a press conference, and then the media decides that their reactions didn't look right. They looked suspicious. They weren't crying, or they were, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then it turns out, so everyone's now looking at the parents and villainizing the parents, and then it turns out they weren't involved in it.
Right.
So, I mean, again, I think that that is despicable of a law enforcement officer with true information actually passes it on the media. That's wrong, and that person should lose their job. And then secondly is there are people in law enforcement, I mean, we're big organizations, and even though we have, a process to eliminate bad apples, there are, in every profession. And I, I see in most of these cases, the well-placed law enforcement source usually is not very well placed or actually directly involved in the investigation or has that much information. But
Wow. And someone just said, Make It So just said that Savannah just released another video with Police for Help. We can check that out and see what that is. It's probably most likely on her Instagram. And I think we're getting down to the wire of the deadline. And like John had said earlier, the deadline doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's going to change when it comes to law enforcement and the way that they are investigating this case, because we don't know. And I'm sure for the family, I couldn't even imagine what it would be like
yeah,
for her.
yeah. Can you understand? You have to understand and appreciate the stress and the grief that the family's going through. Just they're in a helpless situation. They really miss their mother. They love their mother. They wish or knew of something they could do to end this event, but there's nothing they could do. They got to be going crazy. With all the circle fillings and things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to play it really quick. Let's see if we can hear it.
Hi there, everybody. I wanted to come on and just share a few thoughts as we enter into another week of this nightmare. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for all of the prayers and the love that we have felt, my sister and brother and I, and that our mom has felt. Because we believe that somehow, some way, she is feeling these prayers and that God is lifting her even in this moment and in this darkest place. We believe our mom is still out there. We need your help. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And we need your help. So I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement. We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. That's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, is this typical, John, of families, regardless? That one seemed, I mean, I wasn't looking at the screen, but from what I can see, showing it to you guys, it seemed more natural, like she wasn't reading. I could be wrong because I wasn't looking at the screen. Is it typical? Because FBI has procedures, and like we discussed earlier, you don't pay a ransom typically without, well, their policy is without proof of life or proof of a body. But sometimes families do things on their own because they're like, screw your policy. I wouldn't be able to live with myself, whatever the reasons are, right?
Yep.
Oh.
There's nothing, there's no law against paying a ransom. There are laws against receiving a ransom. So the FBI can advise the family as much as they want, but if the family insists on making a payment, there's nothing the FBI can do. I can guarantee you that if the family does make a payment, more than likely the FBI is going to be able to track it and, and continue working the case, And
But they run the risk, don't they? Like they run the risk of that money also disappearing. But what you said earlier was important is now you've handed them $6 million more in resources that they didn't have.
yeah, and giving them the ability to aid in fleeing and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or concealing themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you can do a lot with that kind of money, but yeah. It's just I couldn't even imagine being in that situation to have to make that kind of decision. It's one thing to not have the money and plea and say like, I can't access that kind of money. And then, whatever, but it's another thing to like, whatever the amount is, to have it and know that you can do something, but it's not passing the smell test. They're not meeting, you're asking for proof of life. They're not presenting you with proof of life. And you don't know, it's just, I couldn't imagine.
That's an assumption,
Yeah,
we don't,
no, I am assuming.
we don't know there or not.
Yeah, we don't know if there's any communication with them behind the scenes. We don't know anything. Yes. Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much for being here. And I've taken up an hour and 10 minutes. Thank you for giving me that. Thanks for being here with us. I know that every time you come on, you elucidate us with so much information, and we need to keep doing these. It's just have to find the right things that where it's we're not just coming up with conjecture and surmising.
Yeah, I wish I could give you more direct answers to questions, but there's just a lot of questions that we can't answer now. And I know, the media and social media, they crave the knowledge what is truly going on and stuff. But I caution everybody not to make too many assumptions based on what they're, you just got to wait for the results. Law enforcement, I'm sure, is doing the best that they can, and they're under a lot of scrutiny, and working these big cases, I understand the pressures and stuff that they're feeling,
Yeah, you've worked some of the biggest cases in Los Angeles. You've worked lots of really big homicides. Been the lead detective in lots of big homicides that everyone here has probably heard of. Well, we should get together and talk about those at some point.
Yeah.
Reminisce. I know you don't like to do that too sometimes, because John lives this. Like this was his job for 33 years, and now even in your retirement, you still get asked questions by me, and you still do some auxiliary things, here and there. So, thank you so much for being with us, John. I appreciate you so much.
All righty. No,
We'll
not a
talk
problem.
soon.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye, John. Thank you guys all for being here with us. I just want to say thank you. Oh my God. And my mods, you guys, I haven't been here for so long, and I appreciate you guys so much. Let me just say thank you. Exposing corruption and lies. Hey, girl. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Miss you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for modding. Murky, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. She's a great mod over at Lana's. Lana got a wrench here. I made her work. Thank you, Lana. Appreciate you. Yes, John is, and we talk to John as much as we can. He's a great friend, and great friend of the show, of the channel, and we try to get as much information from him as possible so that we're not over here just guessing, coming up with random conjecture. I appreciate everyone who's here. I appreciate you guys for spending the time with me and getting to know the information firsthand, so we aren't out here guessing. I've seen a lot of things that are just kind of like, why are they going door to door and asking the neighbors questions? And it's like, if they didn't, like, could you imagine what they're not even canvassing. Like, it's just normal to do these things. Thank you to my mods. Thank you. I saw you, TN, Dark Sea. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys. Have a really good afternoon. And we only have a few hours left on the deadline, and hopefully Nancy is returned. And I know that Savannah believes in prayer, and whatever way you guys pray, and however, if it's just positive energies that you do, we should do that for her and as a collective. And she's 84, you guys. Like, just people are wild. Thank you guys so much. Have a really good afternoon. Bye, everybody.